other things I want to get to here, including the Australia Day debate. I've largely avoided talking about it too much on the show because there's the logical and obvious position, and then there is the relentless march of the left position, which will probably ultimately one day win. Sadly, it's not me giving up on the fight, and I'll fight all the way through, but we know how this works. Eventually everyone will be badgered, organisations will be badgered all the way through, and I noticed too that, you know...
It's a way of heading it off, though, if you like.
Yeah.
Okay, what's a better date? It doesn't matter what date is suggested, disagree with it like hell.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Because the status quo will remain until there is an agreed alternative.
Well, but also, my view on the Australia Day debate is always that I think we should have a companion, separate, whatever you want to say, day. I know there's two different things there, but you get what I'm saying. That I think there should be, I've talked about it before, a celebration of Aboriginal Achievement Day, not an endless conversation about a past that can't be changed. You know, Queen's birthday, ta-da, it's not her actual birthday, make it Mabo Day, when the black man used the white man's law to say, guess what, we existed, right? I think that's our path forward, because till then, if all we're going to do is constantly want everyone to atone for something they can't change, and also, what was better about March the 13th for Aborigines in those early years? None of it was. So that, if the argument against the 26th, that is just as relevant, I think, for the rest of the year. But I wanted to show you this because it was a survey of parts of the immigrant community that said 80% of new migrants and refugees believe Australia Day is important for the nation. 90% also plan to become citizens. And I've got to say this, where, Caroline, this is the thing I look forward to most about Australia Day, which is the number of people who on that day put their hand up and say, I'm now going to join the club. Awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome, and I'll be doing a speech at one of those council events, citizenship ceremonies in Sydney, so I'm very much looking forward to that. I always feel, and I'm a migrant myself, that there's this pride, the national pride in migrants can often be so much stronger than people who just take what we've got in Australia for granted. But I thought the other interesting thing out of this survey was that most of them had no idea of the controversy that surrounded Australia Day, and when you ask them, are you aware of this controversy about the date? Would you support changing it? They more often than not, they said, well, yeah, maybe we should just change the date. So, well,
but that said, there are only two local councils that that would actually hit my threshold of, okay, let's have a chat. Alice Springs Council or Darwin Council, neither of which are banning Australia Day, kids. Yes. Neither of which. And okay, if that's the chat, then we can, you know, but. You know, Senator, how do you feel about this? Not just the issue about the date, but just this seems to be the next one, okay? So we had the same-sex marriage, but this seems to be the next one. The Greens have said this is their priority for 2018, and this is how it works. We're slowly but surely what seems to be, you know, an absurd utterance of the left or a sort of a meaningless utterance becomes this sort of ring that must be kissed, and if not, then, you know, blockades and blah, you know how this goes.
When I was a kid, we never took Australia Day very seriously. It was about as serious as Labor Day or the Queen's birthday, you know. The best part about the Queen's birthday used to be the fireworks. Yeah. So now banned. Yeah. Labor Day, I could never figure that one out. So, you know, my sort of attachment to Australia Day isn't all that deep. But when you think about what's the fuss over some symbolic stuff that some Aborigines, not most as far as I can tell, but some Aborigines are concerned about, it's a bit like this amend the Constitution thing, have a treaty, you know, whatever that thing was that they had at Ayers Rock. You know,
the advisory, the side advisory body. Yeah.
You know, when I think about things that need fixing, it's the little Aboriginal kids whose parents are drunk, grandparents are drunk, uncles sexually abuse them. They're lucky if they get to school 2 days a week. The poor little buggers have got no future whatsoever. Yep. Likely to end up petrol sniffing. Every year I have this rant in the Senate, the doorstop, on closing the Gap Day, because the Gap's not closing. No. And why not? Because we're not doing anything that makes a difference. We're talking about bullshit.
Oh, well, 100%. And this, last night we had on the show, and please go and see this on the Facebook page, it is the interview that we had with the Northern Territory Australian of the Year. And she is a paediatric cardiologist, and her thing is not, we don't need billions of dollars, we just need the basic standard of care that exists in the cities to be there in rural communities. This is the sort of person who I want to hear lecturing at us for the next 12 months, rather than the virtue signalling that goes on a lot about all of this. But again, Ben, automatically we are not to discuss this. Being privileged white men, we are unable to have an opinion about this, because apparently the only part that's dark about us is our hearts to this issue.
Please. Look, tomorrow on the program, you yesterday spoke to the Northern Territory Australian of the Year. I'm speaking to the Queensland Australian of the Year, and that's Jonathan Thurston. I know I said earlier in the show we don't care about athletes and their opinions on whatever, but when it comes to this, when Jonathan Thurston and the work that he is doing and is continuing to do in his community, that's what I want to hear, because when it comes down to this debate, to this nonsense about it, it is about Indigenous issues. That's who I want to hear from. I want to hear from someone who is doing something in the community who can actually tell me what the issue is. So we can have an opinion on it, but I'd like to be an informed opinion, and that's why, as you did last night and as I will tomorrow on air, hear from those who are at the coalface, who are trying to do things to make things better.